like with Split Decision, you talk about in the book about being impatient, how like being a player was your full-time job, jewel thief was your day job, player was full-time job, and you moonlit when you were with Rhyme Syndicate stuff. What was it about your mentality at the time that didn't enable you to kind of be like, hey man, things are really moving with Rhyme Syndicate and with Ice. Let me just, focus on that more as opposed to, focusing on other things as well.
Well, when we talk about the impatience and the moonlighting, all that was based on my mindset, my conditioning. And at the end of the day, it's like sitting at a table and you're waiting for your meal to come, but you get impatient. So you go sneak out to the liquor store and buy you a candy bar or something and sneak back to the table. A lot of things I was doing, like Ice and them didn't know. Ice had laid the template down for all of us that, hey, here's a way where you guys, if you want to rhyme, if you want to do whatever it is that he put down as far as that foundation. We had a club and we could open acts, we could do all kinds of things. Because here on the West Coast, it wasn't many of us that were ready to go. We had Nat the Cat, we had a couple of guys that were ready to go, but most of the acts were, from out of California. So me, I wanted to learn how to write. Ice kept me right with him from going on tour with him and everything else. But when we come off tour, I look around and say, hey, I'm not really a good rapper. I really don't know the skill set like Ice and them and all the other guys from New York. What I know how to do best is I'm going to hustle and get me a studio and learn. And I would ask people like, help me write, help me get into it, because I really was inspired by Ice. Ice showed us that we could. At first, we didn't understand it because everybody around us was hustlers, players, what we were here on the West Coast. And I was deeply entrenched in that lifestyle and believed in it. And there's an old saying, based on my impatience, like a biblical saying, a hungry dog returns to his vomit. And I returned when I watched everybody else, getting their turn. It wasn't that I didn't have a turn. Ice inspired me, like, keep going, Spike, you'll get your turn. He even encouraged me to open some acts.
Let me make something clear, though. We wasn't making a lot of money back in them days. You know what I'm saying? It's like when we first started rapping, nobody was eating. I hadn't really made an album. When I stopped hustling, I went broke. I went broke. So you got to understand, it's not that simple just to stop hustling and start rapping, because you don't just start off with a hit record. I mean, there's years before you might actually get enough money rapping to where you can pay your bills. So, of course, I understand why people were still hitting licks.
And
go ahead.
Another thing out of respect, I remember we had a meeting, and this meeting was at the club, and Ice called us all together. He had given us jobs. You want to be in security, you want to open up, start writing, we'll let you get on the stage and do a song or two based on whoever else was coming in town for the featured act. And he just told us, look, I'm going to be transitioning, and if you guys are doing things wrong, don't let me know. I don't want to know about it. Like, don't even tell me about it. And so at the end of the day, I would go on tour with Ice, come back, and I would go back to doing what I do best. Hitting licks, trying to stack some money, stack me a war chest to get me my own studio, and then pursue that career. Because I really did want in.
Right. So Ice, with this meeting at the United Nations in 1989, you detail in Split Decision in the book, what was happening in your life that made you in 1989 say, okay, this is it. This is what's happening. I'm rapping now.
I was becoming famous. And like we said, fame and infamy don't go together. People want to know questions. They want to know things. And I knew they, even back then, the hip hop cops were coming around. They didn't like us. They didn't like me, because we still looking like hustlers. We got the jewelry on. We're driving the cars. We're doing all that thing. But I knew that some of the cats that were around me were still active. So I was just like, look, don't tell me shit. I want to be able to pass a polygraph. If they ask me about you, I want to say, give me the lie detector. I do not know. I don't know. I was doing that for their safety. I told them, consider me bugged. If you're around me, don't talk. I don't know who's listening. I ain't no rat, but I don't know who's watching me. So they all understood it. It was a transition. In the other book, Uh, Ice, the one I had that chapter called Too Famous to Steal, where I was, ripping off a car, and all of a sudden I got surrounded by kids asking for autographs because they saw me walk through the complex. And I'm like, what the fuck? I thought I was getting busted first. And then I saw the kids and they was with their moms. Now I'm taking pictures in front of a G-Ride, like, what the fuck? I bet somebody got those pictures of me standing in front of a hot car.
That was the Ice. That was the Porsche, right?
That was a hot Porsche. I was still in parts for my Porsche. I needed a part that went to the convertible top. So I told these niggas, like, go get the part, and they was dragging. I'm like, give me the fucking wrench. Where's the car? This is how we go in motion. I go in motion. It's in the jungle. And in the jungle, you got to walk through the apartment complexes to get to the back alley where the cars are parked. And I walked right through the little, jungle, and they all have swimming pools filled with concrete. And I walked past them, and by the time I got back there, some kid must have spotted me, seen me in breaking or some shit. It's like, that's Ice-T, right? So now I'm doing dirt, and here come the kids. And so that was a moment where I was like, this right here, no more. Also, another time, one of my buddies, Al P, the cops busted him. They jumped out on him at a funeral, and he said, I work with Ice-T. And they said, well, Ice-T works amongst a den of thieves. And tell Ice-T we got enough film on him to make a fucking motion picture. So I knew they was on my bumper, but they just couldn't catch me in the act. That film, wasn't good, but they knew what was up. And it was time to call it a day. Also, there's a thing called the odds. Like Spike says, we were getting away, like hundreds and hundreds of felonies. The odds got to catch up with you. Eventually, something's going to go wrong. And I felt it. I just felt it, like it'll happen now. So I called off the jam and said, hey, this is how I'm about to roll, y'all. And no one had any problem with it. Everybody was like, oh, nigga, even though when I first started rapping, people be like, man, you better come get this money, man. What's that rap bullshit? Because no one had ever made any money rapping. No one had even bought a car at that time from rapping.
Yeah, it's just amazing for people to understand, too, with Rhyme Pays and with Power being so successful that in 1989, after huge album, platinum album, and all this stuff and all the shows you were doing, that it was still like not enough to make you break away till a little bit later. That's just crazy.
Think about it like this. John DeLorean tried to do a coke deal. You know what I'm saying? While he had it's street money is money. I mean, if you make an album and the album goes platinum, you can make, after taxes and stuff, like, you might gross $300,000, $400,000. That's over a year of work, where you can go out one night and make that. See what I'm saying? So fast money is always more intriguing, but it's not, the life expectancy on it isn't that great.
Yeah. And unfortunately, of course, Spike had to deal with that directly, as you guys detail in Split Decision. And Spike, I wanted you to break down when you were understanding that your responsibility in the hit or the heist that led you to serve your time, that you were the boss, or you were in control, and you didn't manage the crew properly. When that realization hit you, what was that like to really fully comprehend that?
Well, because of how I lived in most of my past before that moment, I knew that I was in charge of a lot of things. People I would put together, the crews, the licks, all those things. And like I said, this intoxication, this egocentric part of me, all that came from me hands-on. In this particular, this final lick that I should have never even chose to do, I did. But I passed it off to a guy I met, and the crew was mainly his crew. So when I look back on it after we got busted, or the first time that I realized some body got shot in the leg when I was in that motel room and I came to collect the rest of the jewelry. It was quiet. It was eerie quiet, and those kids were in there, and I was talking to the main guy who I had recruited, and those were his recruits. So I was like, what happened? Where's the other bag of jewelry? And he said, this person fucked up. And I looked at this young kid pacing back and forth in this room, and I was staring in the corner of my eye like, what the fuck happened? What do you mean that he fucked up, like he shot somebody? And I was like, whoa. At that point, I disconnect because I wasn't actually in there in the robbery, but still, I was responsible, but I hadn't accepted full responsibility. When I accepted full responsibility is when, as the passing days had happened and I got captured, and I realized that all this happened because I put it together. I set it off. And when that happened, and then the point that I sat in that courtroom, I wouldn't let my family or no one attend. But I'd always look over my right shoulder, my left shoulder, and I would see the deceased person's family. And it broke my heart. And I was like, you know what? I have to sincerely apologize to this family because this is my own doing. You know, I took responsibility 100%. I took responsibility by letting them know I'm just as guilty as if I exposed that trigger. I had to. It became human to me at that moment. It became real human when I looked at that mother with a chain around her neck with her baby, her son. That picture was on her neck. And I turned and I just was like lost into this space in my head. I was like, you know, maybe for sad as if that was my mother and I lost someone. And then I looked at her like, you know, this is effed up. You gotta let them know. And I just kept telling my attorney when I took the stance, whatever happens here, I need to talk to that family. I need to not only apologize and let him know he didn't deserve that, but it was my fault. And I did that. It was my way of coming clean. And that was the first time in my life that I had to come clean. And it was sad because this can happen to any kid out there. You get caught up thinking you're just egotistical. They called me the mastermind because I was. And I used to be real devious and calculating and all that. And this part of my healing and change had to happen there. And it came over me when I saw that his parents. So his parents, I was like, I gotta, and tears rolled down my authentic, real tears rolled down because I was hurting because they were hurting. Yeah. And I turned and I looked at him and I told him, please, I'm sorry, you know, in court. No matter what was gonna happen, I needed to make that clear.
Well, I think you guys do a great job of that in Split Decision because one of the other things that both you and Spike do in your own conversation is the kind of the collateral damage. Because Ice, you're talking about MC got a bid and BO was murdered. Spike got 35 to life. So for someone that wasn't getting hit with those, wasn't getting, you know, these bids, but was still affected because it was happening to your friends, I wanted you to speak about the collateral damage that people often don't consider or think about.
Well, if someone goes to prison, you know, their family does time with them. You know, I think, you know, there's people that get hurt in the process of your greed. You're trying to get money. You don't care. It's very, very selfish life you're living. And you don't really care about nobody because it's you over everything. And you can, like Iceberg Slim says, before you do this stupid thing, you rationalize in your brain why you're gonna do this stupid thing. We're gonna take this money because, you know, they don't give a fuck about us. I'm fucked. I'm an orphan. I'm stuck. I don't have a chance. People hate me, and they got insurance, and they'll get it back, and I need it, and they don't. You just construe this making you right. I'm gonna do this. This is right, but it's wrong. You walking in these places, scaring the hell out of people, traumatizing people, doing all this kinds of stuff. And one thing, our crew, we were never into violence. That was one thing that was a no-no. We never carried weapons. We might have carried weapons on the street to protect ourselves from the other wolves, but in the act of the crime, there were never any weapons available because we just decided, like, look, you know, I mean, on a criminal level, if people are after merchandise, they'll chase for a minute. If they're after somebody getting hurt, they'll chase forever. And we were just like, you know, these stores are insured. They might look for us for a month or so, and then it'll go cold. When Spike got in trouble, that rule was broken. There were guns brought to the lick, and of course, the worst happened. It's a lot of collateral damage. And one thing I like to tell people that listen to this is there's a theory that if you've got money, you can get out of jail. Forget about that. If you get caught and they got you red-handed, you're going to jail. I don't give a fuck. And, you know, maybe OJ skated, it cost that nigga $10 million. You don't got that. And once you're sentenced, even Harvey, what's the Epstein, that piece of shit child molester, billionaire, couldn't get out of jail. He killed himself. You know, so you got to understand that when Spike goes under, even though he's got somebody out here now that might have access to millions of dollars, I couldn't help him because now he's on sentence. He's 25 without the possibility of appeal. The only chance we could help Spike was when he got to that parole board, which we did and got him out. But there's a lot of collateral damage, and you're going to hurt your family. You're hurting other people. You might be leaving your kids. You might be leaving your wife, everything. So you got to weigh out, if you're going to break the law, like risk versus reward. You know, I've seen people do fucking things for $10,000, man, that risk their life for that. Don't do that.
And I want to say something, Ice, just to piggyback. I never forget when I was doing all those years, that 35 to life, did 26 years on it. My daughter, when I finally was able to get in touch with her, I felt the toll of what collateral damage, that ripple effect that it had on her. She asked me, she said, "Dad, if you love me so much, how come you couldn't quit?" And I was so floored by that because, you know, here I am, no matter how much I'm changing, who I'm helping, sitting in front of these scared straight children. I have my own daughter that was doing time with me. And before I failed, I was Superman to her. She didn't know I was living this double life because I hid it from her. But once I fell and she had to see me behind that glass, and then all the other things came out, my womanizing, just all that stuff that I was doing, her mother and I stopped being in touch with each other. And then I found myself alone. I would write letters to my daughter and they weren't getting answered. And before long, I had this long journey like Moses across the desert for 40 years. I was by myself. Not just because I went off the grid and wasn't getting in touch with Ice and Tron and Rich and them, but I was by myself. And that's the road that continues to wait for people. Like little Jimmy tomorrow, if he's born and he commits to this life of criminality, that road waits for you. It's the other side of the coin. And so even right today, my daughter's a grown woman. I have 3 grandchildren, but she's still affected to that. Right now, today, she's affected. And all that's because I didn't change back then. I didn't stop. And that's the conditioning of being absent out of her life, neglect, all those things. So yeah, there's a steep toll that continues on. And we're trying to work through it the best we can.
Be sure to check out the history of gangster rap by Soren Baker. He's official.
History of Gangster Rap features exclusive interviews with Ice-T, Snoop Dogg, MC Ren, the D.O.C, and dozens of others. The History of Gangster Rap, a definitive look at how Los Angeles changed rap forever.
In Los Angeles, the streets definitely set the tone of the hip-hop music.
At 19, I got a $50,000 car.
My whole angle always was, I'll be street, but I will always tell you the horrors that go along with this life.
It would be penalties and casualties for just wearing the wrong color in somebody's neighborhood.
And once gangster rap made it from the streets to the TV, the genre exploded.
With Fab 5 on your MTV Raps with NWA.
Yo MTV, it just catapulted us from being local heroes to national gangbang rappers.
The history of gangster rap discusses it all from 1980 up till today.
It's always gonna be shit happening in the streets. You know what I mean? So it's always gonna be something to talk about.
The history of gangster rap in stores now.